So let me know when you want me to kick off.
Go ahead.
Awesome. All right, so today, welcome to one of our Pragmatic Works Training on the T sessions. This is a unique session in that I'm not going to cover one specific topic, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on any specific topic. We're looking at some hidden gems in SQL 2016. You know, that's one of my subtitles. They aren't flashy, but we're glad they're there. We're going to go look at some of these things that you may not have known have been added or things that you've been looking for. I got about 15 topics that we're going to cover in the next 50 minutes or so, and that means that we're going to do some, pretty quick run through on some of them, and some of them might have demos. Most of them I don't because they're, hey, did you know you could turn this on and type a feature, and hopefully you'll find some of this very interesting and compelling of some reasons to look at SQL Server 2016 moving forward. So let's get started here. A little bit about me. My name is Steve Hughes. I'm a principal consultant at Pragmatic Works. I am also known as Data on Wheels, so you can find me on Twitter. Usually I'm just talking about what I'm blogging about or speaking about at any given time. I'm not very active there, but my blog has a lot of different topics on it, and I will be doing follow-up on this session hopefully next week or so on that blog post as well as on pragmaticworks.com. So I encourage you to check out all of what Pragmatic Works has to offer. You may have been seeing the slides roll down. I'm glad you're here for our free training. Well, let's get rolling. SQL Server 2016. I had to pull this quote from MSDN, and the reason I did it was because this is the hidden gem part actually matters more in this release than in some other ones. In our the past few releases since the leap from 5 to R2, 2008 R2, and then from that leap to 2012. Microsoft's saying that this is the biggest leap forward in data platform history for Microsoft. Now they're including everything. The little image that I grabbed off MSDN up in the corner, they're talking about hybrid and cloud and on-premises, but that's all a part of the SQL Server story now. You can't consider SQL Server without looking seriously at what you can get in the box, on-premise, hybrid, and cloud. So as Microsoft moves forward with their cloud-first strategy, this has been a big deal for them. And what I like about when we've seen this release is, some parts of the product that have been kind of neglected while new technologies like in-memory have come on board have seen some love, and some, more love than others. And but in this session, we're not going to talk about, hey, look, mobile reporting is now available in reporting services. We have an entire session about some of these big picture items. This is going to highlight a number of improvements made to the stack, some new things that were added that realistically just don't, they're not, frankly, just not cool enough for Microsoft to throw that in front of you. But because it's the biggest leap forward, even what I am covering, and I'm going to touch most of the platform in some way, shape, or form. We're going to talk a little bit about the data engine. We're going to talk a little bit about integration services. We're going to talk a little bit about analysis services, and I'm barely going to touch reporting services because, frankly, that had such a huge amount of work. There was another session in our month this month that covers that. I'm not sure if that's before or after me, but you can check our schedule for that. So if you're looking at some big, some of those big ticket things, check out our schedule. We're covered 9 sessions, including this one on SQL Server and the release and what's involved. So let's have a look at some of these cool things that have been added that Microsoft's not talking a lot about. And I've been talking about comparing our gems a little bit already. Highly visible things, always encrypted, stretched database, SSRS mobile, formerly known as DataZen. I'm from Minnesota, so we enjoy the formerly known as. Polybase and JSON, these are things that I presented on, my peers are presenting on, and we've talked a lot about these great new technologies or great improvements to technology that Microsoft's bringing forward. Our hidden gem list, file snapshot backups in Azure. TempDB, how is TempDB a hidden gem? We're going to talk through some of that. New DAX functions and tabular models, always on basic groups, and so much more. And we're going to cover some of these, and I think I may not even, I don't even know if I talk about basic groups, but it's a cool thing anyway. It's an always on session later. So let's jump into the wonderful world of hidden gems. First of all, the not so hidden gem is SQL Server Management Studio. What I want to be clear on is that you now have the option to download the latest and greatest Management Studio, and it will be updated and managed outside of the SQL Server install. And that starts with this release. And I actually am going to jump. This is going to be like one of those weird demos, but I want to jump to my installation center. So I'm pretending like I'm installing another instance on my laptop. And what I want to talk about is this right here. Look at that. We get to click this button and install management tools. But you know what you're really doing? You're not actually getting it off the disk. So this is a look at the install on the disk. What is it actually telling us it's going to do? Oh, you know what? We're going to launch a download page. Oh, well, that's not. I mean, that means it's not on the disk anymore at all. And it was interesting for me is I actually got an update notice because I had done RC3, and I got an update notice to go get the latest version on release. So we're seeing Management Studio fall into this new space from an install piece that we typically like, oh, I got to install this on the server. Well, now you have to be very intentional about installing on the server. So now when you set up a server, you don't have to say, oh, I don't want to install management tools. I got to figure that out and hit the right check boxes. You're not going to have the option to install management tools in the install process. And as a result, that gives us the ability to install safely without having those management tools by default. And if we want them, we have to be very intentional about getting the install put in. It was also nice that they added a link for SQL Server data tools in case you don't already have those in the latest version. So the install, it adds these two links. One of those little things in install that they don't talk a whole lot about, but it's there. And I wanted you to be aware of that. The key with it being completely separate, like I said, they'll be able to download this, and you'll be able to download this out of band from the rest of the SQL. And you can still manage, older versions of SQL Server in Management Studio like you did before, and do some of that work there. But now you can actually pull the latest and greatest without having to install 2016. This really comes into play when you think about Azure integration and some of the components that are in Management Studio to help you with Azure. You can actually connect some, like at Blob Storage, some of the management tools to Azure. Well, as those get improved, and maybe you're still on SQL 2014 or SQL 2012, but you are using Azure in some scenarios, but you can't update your on-prem, now you can go to Management Studio and still use the latest and greatest with like Azure tools, but not have to go grab an install of SQL Server to do this. You can just download the Management Studio. The also nice part is, now I can just download it and install it without getting the media anyways. So if I don't want to go through that process or it causes me grief, I now can easily install Management Studio. So that's the first one. I call it out because for me, I like this. This is a big deal. This is one of those things that I really appreciate that they have done. Live query statistics, and we're going to run a quick demo on this. Keep in mind, I'm cherry picking things off. So we're going to go through a few things in the data engine, some of which I'll demo, some of which I won't. But I want to talk about live query statistics. We have often, run tools and been able to watch, say, okay, give me the estimated and then give me the, the actual plan before and after. Well, what if I can see how my plan is doing midstream? What if I can watch what's going on? Well, now you can. As you can see here in this button that I've highlighted in the first image there on the top, that will actually do live query statistics in SQL in Management Studio. Part of what runs that is a query store stuff, which we don't actually talk about in detail here, which is another cool feature that gets added, and a lot of talking, a lot of sessions have been done on already. So let's have a look at live query statistics. So I have this simple query right here, and you're going to see on the bottom, obviously I have my query statistics. I've turned it on by going to the button above. I think I need to reconnect. Just a second here. Let's make sure I'm connected. Yeah, that's what I thought. Knock me off. I will talk about one other thing then while I'm here, is if you're not aware, another new little feature from Microsoft is there's no longer AdventureWorks is not the de facto sample database anymore. Now we have wide world importers. Not worldwide importers like pretty much everybody calls it. It's actually wide world importers. So you can actually go download this from, I believe it's GoPlex. There's links for looking that up and getting the sample databases for SQL 2016. So that's what we're actually running against. I'm running against the DW database. And what we really want to highlight is what's going to happen when I run this, when I have live query statistics added. Oops, let's go there. All right, let's go ahead and execute this. And as you can see down at the bottom, it's actually giving me statistics on the way, including row counts, all the numbers there, and I actually get the equivalent of being, what's done. I'm 100% complete. If you're running a long query and you're trying to investigate what's going on, this will give you a chance to actually see what is picking up in the plan. This plan is very simple, and the purpose of this was to show you that you can see, the progression as we move through live query statistics. But what's really cool about this is you now can monitor the performance of your queries live. What I encourage you to do is, in conjunction with this, is also to evaluate the query store, because this allows you to collect data, these plans, and do more with it, but you can actually see what's going on and determine potentially if you need to actually turn on query store and track some plans, making sure that you are running with the correct set of data. So that is one of those hidden gems that, go out, Management Studio. Once you've downloaded it, go out, try your live query statistics, have a look at it live. There's nothing better than watching data move. Trust me, it's just so exciting. But at least here you get a chance to see what's actually happening in the plan as you move along. Next one, file snapshot backups to blob. So this is an interesting scenario, and I don't know how many people are actually using this, but if you are actually extending your database and using Azure blob storage for your database files, which I find, there's probably not a lot of you doing this at the moment, but if you're fully committed and you're actually using blob storage, you're going to find that you can do snapshot backups, which allow you to do faster backup and restores. And I have the nice little image from MSDN to walk us through this. But basically, I think for me the big thing to learn about this, and when I talk about it being a hidden gem, was, if I was doing this, I'm already in my data, all my data files. So they show the MDF and LDF files are all on my Azure blob storage. So I'm using it as my SAN essentially. So I have all this stuff sitting on my SAN. So then I go and back it up. Well, I can actually set it up to do a file snapshot. So we're actually getting snapshot backups. This is very similar to what we could do in some SAN scenarios and other areas where we can actually do snapshots. What's really cool is it continues to hold these. The advantage here is that you're using storage out in Azure for your data files and for your backup snapshot files, allowing you to actually pick a point in time to recover or to do other things, but actually your overall file backups and restore are actually much quicker than they would be if in the traditional method. Not sure how, for me this is like, oh, this is the start of that Microsoft's commitment to the cloud and what they're doing to make improvements that they can't do in your data center. They're actually putting these improvements in the cloud and allowing you to take advantage of them. It is completely a feature of SQL 2016, so it's new from that perspective. Storing the log files is not new, or storing all your files, your data and log files is not new, but being able to snapshot your backups for quick backup and recovery, that is new, and that's kind of that hidden gem. They don't really talk about that. It's just one of actually many backup features involving cloud storage that have been improved. TempDB. There's a list. So this is the kind of the cheater on my, I have 15 gems I want to talk about. Well, TempDB got some love. If you are a DBA, you know exactly what trace flags 1117 or 1117, 1118, however you say that, you know what they are. These are what helped us solve some serious contention issues and problems inside of TempDB when we had extensive use in those scenarios. We can say goodbye to those trace flags. That work that was in the trace flags is now embedded in the engine. There's nothing we need to do special to deal with that. So the allocations are happening the way we want them to. Things are growing at the same rate. All the work that we had to do in pre-setup is now being taken care of for us. And you're like, okay, what does that actually mean? Well, let's set up, and I'm going to go back to a setup screen to show you this. It adds as many TempDB files as CPU count, or 8, whichever is lower. So it's automatically splitting your files because it assumes that if you're running SQL Server, that you want to be able to do this and configure it. Now, if you're managing a lot of SQL Server instances and you deploy, maybe you have your own VM set and you want to deploy and set these up, so whenever I create a new one, I want to set a specific set of parameters, you can actually go into the database engine configuration and go ahead and fix those and set that up the way you want it to. That I don't have a demo showing, but I just want you to be aware that there are ways for you as DBAs, if you're managing a huge amount of servers and instances, you have the opportunity to expand what you can do and more management. The third thing on this list is, I found this funny. So they listed this as, oh, this is really cool about TempDB. The default initial size is 8 meg and default is autogrowth 64 meg. Well, realistically, all new databases have the same metrics. And so now as you go into, this is a little bit different than we used to see when we built these and what model DBs has for us. So this is where the default sizes are. So if you're doing some planning and some work around it, you need to understand the default size now for TempDB fits like this as well as autogrowth. Also, if you create a new database or just a regular database, you're going to get the same initial size if you don't predefine the sizes that you plan to use. Just thought you should know that. And I did find it interesting that they say this is great on TempDB, and then I went and looked and went, hey, oh, it's also true on all my other databases. So let's have a look at what that TempDB setup looks like. Let me get to the right setup window here. So I'm in the middle. You can see that I've gone through a good portion of my, my setup. I've named my instance, all the wonderful stuff. I don't plan to actually create a second instance on my laptop. It's not something I really want to do. But you can see here that it actually defaulted, because I'm using Developer Edition, not Enterprise. It actually said, hey, you know what? I'm going to give you 4 files because you're running a 4-core box. So it measured my cores, knew what I was doing, and said, all right, let's do 4 files. We're going to start out each file with the initial size and the autogrowth set as we noted in the previous, and then, of course, plug it into the data directory where you want it. And doing the same thing with the log. The cool part, this is the install process. So you can, this is where, before we'd have to go in after the fact and do this level of configuration to get us to where TempDB needed to be. This was one of those surprises when I actually installed SQL 2016. I believe the first time I saw this or noticed what it was in the release candidate, one of the release candidates, or the RTM. I can't remember which at the moment. But when I got here, I'm like, oh, this is cool, because I remember doing some of this setup and going, oh, this, just trying to keep in mind I had to do this, and then turning trace flags on. I'm frankly not a DBA. I don't often go into the this level of configuration unless I'm working on a specific project that needs it, and that I'm usually helping DBAs get where they need to be. Well, now it's just, hey, have you configured this correctly? And we can go and look at it and do what we need to do. But this, at least now, you can do this on install as opposed to doing it way after the fact and trying to sort out those pieces. Microsoft's doing more intelligent install pieces, whether that's good or bad is primarily up to you to decide as DBAs, but they are trying to figure out what the right settings are based on what it understands your configuration of your server. So like I said, in my case, I have 4 cores, so I get the 4 files as that's optimized for my environment as far as they can tell. All right, so that gives us through TempDB. Hopefully, you find some of that good and compelling, and we can, as you move forward on TempDB, there's some more stuff that's there. This is just a part of the list of the improvements they've made. They've also made some improvements on performance and some some automated things to help TempDB operate more efficiently in our world today. String split. So if you recall, Microsoft talking through all these years, what's the best way to take a comma-separated string, bring it into the database, and do something with it? One of the ways was to use XML data type methods. People built their own functions. They've used all kinds of methodologies to get this done, right? And what's interesting about that is that while you're working through all these things, wouldn't it have just been easier to have string split? Well, now we have it. So I have my, this is all my family on here, and I'm like, you know what, this is a syntax for it. But one of the things that you have to be aware of, this is actually in the from clause. So when you do it, it's not a function. It returns a table. So if you want to actually work, say you have a comma-separated list with a set of other information, you would use cross-apply to get that there. So if we actually went in and let's go look at the query. Actually, I'm going to go over to my Studio, and we're going to look at the query. Now, this is 100% has to be supported within SQL 2016. But so you can see here, I've declared a string and a typical input. So if you look at this from a store procedure standpoint, now I can actually split this across a delimiter. and get my list. So now I have my list here. If I wanted to do more with it, I don't have this code in here, but you could actually use cross-apply. I don't know if people are familiar with cross, depends on what you've done. If you cross-apply with another table, so that would typically happen if I have a set of strings in a field. So if I drop it into a field in a table and I need to stretch it out, and I want to actually, like my table may have had my information around my family, and I want to put each person's name with the last name and the family, but I have all that stored together. This will allow me to actually do that through cross-apply. I can cross-apply another table, and it will actually essentially pivot that table, or not pivot, pivot's the wrong word, but do a cross-join to allow these to work for every row that you have. I don't have that in the demo now, but I want you to know that that's a common practice in how you would do this. If you've used XML data type methods for a while, or you've looked at even the JSON types, you know that cross-apply is a key factor in being able to take essentially hierarchical data and distribute it evenly across the fields that you're working with on your result sets. So that's, I love the fact that now I have string split and I have the option to do this. This is something that we didn't have for so long. So now, yay, we can actually do this. Okay, this is for all the DBAs out there who love it when you upgrade and you lose the ability to, track your usage stats. You're like, oh, every time I upgrade from 2008, 2012, 2014, every time you upgrade to those versions, this table got flushed out. As it turns out, before SQL 2008 R2, that did not happen. Obviously, a number of you have raised this to Microsoft saying this really needs to change back to the original functionality because now we get it back. For those of you who are not familiar with this allows you to actually keep the stats during your upgrade. Something typically the stats would be removed, partly because the optimizers, the logic behind the original is like, well, the optimizer is changing. So your index usage would likely change, and so on and so forth it goes. But that's not a reality. A lot of our index usage doesn't change that much. The optimizer could use it more efficiently or those kind of things, but we want to see that history. So we don't want to lose the history of our index usage, and this is one of those. I like this as a hidden gem for the DBAs who really do a lot of management and are looking at upgrading and thinking, have you either been through this pain point before or something like that. This is not something that Microsoft's touting way out there in front, but it is one of those little things that just makes it, makes the decision to move to 2016 even easier. So if you're looking for an upgrade to 2014 and you are really trying to make a choice between 2014 and 2016, these are some of those things that could, tip the scale in favor of 2016 as we go, I need to keep those stats and it's been holding me back for whatever reason. Just because maybe you've worked a lot in tuning and you're trying to keep track of these things. This allows you to retain those records. Another little hidden gem in there in the database engine, really targeting those DBAs who really have to do a lot of work to keep indexes up to date, and this is just an opportunity to retain that information. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. So that was some hidden gems in the database engine. What about an SSIS? So there's some of this gets talked about and some of it gets glossed over quite a bit. This is one of those glossed over items. So this comes up in, Always On support comes up in a number of conversations, and it's like, oh yeah, SSIS is now supported. That's kind of how Microsoft actually talks about it. It's very interesting, and frankly, that's even how I've talked about it in launch events. Oh yeah, by the way, SSIS is supported. Well, that's a pretty big deal because it's not just the fact that it's supported. It actually supports failover with availability groups now. So now if you have a mission critical SSIS task and you're like, oh, I'm building out my own work so I can actually have this failover. I'm backing into clustering however I can get it there and make sure that I'm protected. If you're running in package deployment mode with SSIS all of its contents move. And right now I'm hearing everybody go, oh, I really don't want to do this because project deployment has issues, I can't update things the way I want to. We're getting to that. There's another little hidden gem in here. But right now what's important to note is if you're running mission critical SSIS, you are now supported if you're running in this mode, in project mode, because it's all part of the SSDB, SSIS which is now supported completely in availability groups, giving you the opportunity to be highly available on that portion of your solution. So that's just, you know, another add-on for Always On. There's more that's been done in availability groups and Always On. This is one of those ones that, just like I said, this is a glossed over item. People don't talk about it all that often. Incremental deployment. So remember how I said, oh, I hate running projects. I can tell you how many times I work with customers. They're like, I would love to use that, but I have to redeploy the entire project to get one package update into, you know, SSI. So now I'm going to revert back to kind of older methods and manage all my configuration and really do it the way that, you know, it's kind of ugly and hard to maintain. Well, Microsoft heard us. That's what I'm going to go with on this one. We can now deploy one or more packages to an existing or a new project that's been deployed. And the beauty of that is that now we can actually do package level management, but take advantage of project level support. And this is a really big deal. How is it done? It's supported in most deployment mechanisms, whether it's T-SQL, the deployment wizard, any of the automated versions that you would do from deployment. The key here is that now we can actually do it. And because, I'm going to show you what it looks like in the deployment wizard. Let's see here. I have a project that's basically empty, but I really wanted to show you what that looked like so I can actually go out and deploy a package. And in the wizard, you have select deployment model. Do you want to do a project deployment package? And then select the ones you want to deploy. So as we go through the wizard, it actually says, I'm not going to plug all the pieces in, but it actually gets us through that process and allows us to pick. It's also supported in, like I said, Management Studio and some of the other techniques that you'd use to use in deployment management. The key here is being aware that I now have this ability, something that we did not have before, and it really, you know, this matched up with the previous slide, and Always On. These two features by themselves are a very compelling reason to make sure you're running on 2016 for SSIS. And, you know, originally we talked about how the big changes were in SSIS in 2012 and why you'd want to upgrade there. This is another reason to look at an upgrade, even if it's just in your SSIS world, so you can take advantage of these two new features that are in SSIS. Version support. So because we all run one version of everything, and the bigger your enterprise, the more true this isn't. So there's a little bit of sarcasm in there. But realistically, being able to support multiple versions in one version of Visual Studio, if I think all of us have been through the pain of what version do I need to install for Visual Studio to support package development on these different platforms. In Visual Studio 2015, SQL Server data tools, the download for everything that runs data in Visual Studio. You can now target and deploy packages to 2012, 2014, and 2016. So targeting is I can create packages that support 2012. So if I'm working on something and it's a 2016 task, I will not see that. I will actually be operating in a 2012 mode. Same thing with 2014, and now I get 2016. Now if you're running 2008 R2, I highly recommend you look at upgrading. So even if it's targeting 2012, at least now you can stabilize out to your Visual Studio version. If you have an in-house development shop, depending on what version of Visual Studio they're running on, if everybody runs on Visual Studio 2015, this simplifies your development environment across the board for custom development and for data development. So what does this look like? If we go in here, this is actually set at the solution level. That's where we can go into properties and, oh, sorry, not project level, my bad. And that property list didn't look right. So in configuration properties now, I can actually go and say right there, target server version, which one do I want to do? And this is similar to, the guys who do development on regular development tools. This is very similar to some of those platform choices like for .NET and so on. This allows you to actually pick and choose the correct platform and server version that you're going to be targeting for development. and this allows you to make sure that you're actually developing code and deploying code that actually is supported on those platforms. So a pretty big deal. It lets us at least work in one IDE, making our lives a little bit easier from that perspective, and it's a nice little hidden gem that, once again, one of those things that's there in SSIS but not talked about a lot. SSIS also introduced a number of connections and tasks. Some of these existed out and just had to be installed outside. Some of these are new. So connections include the connection manager components as well as source and target destinations for most of these scenarios. I did have a little bit of a laugh. Excel 2013 is natively supported now. It has its own type, as well as Excel 2016. So this is kind of cool because it actually is, they're handling those versions. We all know that exporting and importing data from Excel is nothing that we ever really want to do, but it's supported anyways now. A lot of HDFS work went into SSIS. This is really important if you're running Hadoop, and the key here is HDFS. It does not, it's not HD Insight. It's not specific to Microsoft's platform. It's connectors to help you actually interact with data and move data around within HDFS. So SSIS is being able to take advantage of some of these other tools and can help you manage data flow in and out of your platforms. ODBC for SQL 2016, I threw this on here because they brought it up. Yeah, there you go. You can use ODBC for 2016 if that's what you need to do. SAP BW has a connector in there now, as well as OData versions 3 and 4. 3 and 4 both support JSON, but 3 I believe is the one that it supports. I think it's XML as well. I can't remember the exact version on that, but 4 only supports JSON. So just be aware that OData is now supported with additional versions, so there's more options there for connecting to OData sources. These tasks here, I'm not as familiar with the first two on the list. I wanted to bring them up just so you knew if you're actually using them. They're now included in the box, and you'll see them on your list. Analysis services task for Tabular. A lot of work went into the analysis services tasks to manage the Tabular environment. So this includes, processing and updating and doing some of the other things you would typically do with multidimensional. And so now the tasks have been updated to support Tabular more natively. And I believe in some cases it actually supports the new JSON syntax for actually doing management of the tabular models in analysis services as well. Azure. We can't go too far anywhere inside of SQL Server without talking about where it's impacted by Azure. The Azure Feature Pack is an additional download, so if you're doing a lot of work in Azure, you should definitely look at this. If you're, depending on the type of work that you're trying to accomplish, we've got 2 new connectors. We can connect to storage or the subscription, and so either of those connectors can be valuable, especially I look at this and looking at what the tasks are related to, especially from Azure Blob and HD Insight tasks. So a lot of this is file-based. I'm sure much of this is built on top of the HDFS work that was already done, so it's all kind of in conjunction of Microsoft's HDFS platform. When I look through the task list of what's coming, Blob, upload, and download, one of the common questions we have is, well, what tools should we use to do that? Especially if I don't really have anything and all I've been doing is SSIS. Well, now you can do this easily with the storage tasks that are there and allow you to manage what's in your storage, both uploading and downloading the content. And realistically, if you're looking to take advantage of HD Insight, it's you notice this is really all around HD Insight. If you really understand how this is built, you're going to use Azure Blob Upload to push data into your blob storage, and you can turn on a cluster. What I really like about this is if you have some advanced analytics that specifically you could take advantage of HD Insight, in particular like Hive, so you're running some Hive queries or some other work like that, and you want to just spin up HD Insight, so you create the cluster, you go out, get the data, and you can remove the cluster when you're done, helping you manage your costs in that scenario. This is a pretty unique opportunity to to try some of this out and make sure if you're not familiar with HD Insight, you pay for it while it's up and it's running, and you have to actually delete it if you don't want to pay for it anymore. So it would be funny to only have the create task without the delete it. You actually need both in order to optimize your usage of Azure and be able to take advantage of this. Hive allows you just to build tables and queries and run content against that. Pig is another another variation on getting data and moving ETL and moving data within Hadoop. So there's options to actually run pig functions in there as well. So that's all available for free as a part of the Azure feature pack. It's not coming out of the box. You download that feature pack, you get some new functionality for work with Azure. Now we're going to jump over to tabular models a little bit, talk about them, and you know, some of the new things there. Now, they added 50 new functions in DAX. A bunch of them are math and statistical functions, you know, edge case type things. You know, so if you're doing a lot of work and you're trying to figure out how do I create these calcs, those 50 new functions, you know, there's some serious math things in there. A couple other, you know, there's a calendar item in there as well. But the one I really been looking for, the one I've wanted for as long as, you know, we've had DAX, date diff. I just want to know the difference between the 2 days, and we now have that function available. So if you are like me and you're like, how long is it going to take for us to get this information? Now we have it. So now you can easily compare content between a couple of date-time columns in your environment and work within that. So this gives you the, you know, this gives you that capability to, you know, it's just basic functionality. I'm just happy it's there. And hopefully, you know, you're with me on the excitement. I encourage you to go look at all the new DAX functions. If you are particularly looking for something in particular in math space, in the math space, I would definitely have a look. There's a lot of new functions that got added. As I said, over 50 have been added. Take advantage and look at that as they continue to expand DAX capability throughout the system. One thing maybe I do have that here. I don't think I do. I do want to, you know, bring up something I'm not, you know, another new feature that I wasn't able to demo and get, you know, and would have wanted to demo and talk about some more, was calculated tables. I think I do talk about that, but you can actually, let's go figure out where I'm at. Got new DAX functions. Direct query data sources. This is relevant because the next slide we talk about the improvements to direct query. But now you can direct query Oracle, Teradata, and APS, which is Microsoft's MPP appliance. It used to be called Parallel Data Warehouse. Why is this relevant? Because now I can leave my data in Oracle, Teradata, and APS and take advantage of a true, direct query is becoming a true metadata layer that you can work with, or a, that's the word I'm looking for, but the, you know, this layer allows you, a semantic layer, that's the word I'm looking for. It gives you a semantic layer to interact with a lot of data. It supports a lot of SQL Server, a lot of Azure components already. By adding in more non-Microsoft sources as well as APS, you now have the ability to use direct query against an Oracle data warehouse on Tabular, present that data and have that be your semantic layer that exposes data from Oracle to your users in Power BI or in Excel, depending what the tools, or, you know, frankly, any tool that can interact with Tabular directly. This direct query method allows you to model the data, create the models that you need, and then surface those through Tabular, allowing you to take advantage of leaving the data where it sits and building, you know, taking advantage of existing data assets on these platforms. The improvements to the query process is a part of the reason why this is relevant. My favorite line, simpler queries generated. If you've ever looked at queries generated by any of these tools, they're rarely, if ever, simple. Now, that doesn't mean they're simple queries. It just means that they're doing simpler queries, meaning hopefully they're getting better at generating the context and generating the queries to give us overall better performance in the environment when we do direct query. This is a big deal because we really want to be able to take advantage of other things that are happening, and we go in direct query and really use a semantic layer that needs to perform well and provide that data in meaningful ways. Row level security is now supported. This is also important. Row level security was implemented in 2016 at the database level, so you can actually use SQL Server row level security. You can also do, you know, implement row level, you know, use native row level security on other tools. This is something that's been coming for a little while. It's going to allow you to, you know, pass credentials to the underlying data store so that the user will only see the data they're supposed to see. This is truly relevant from a semantic layer implementation standpoint because we want to be able to take advantage of security models already in place in underlying data structures and only pass a request through and have it filtered on the way back. So now we are able to manage security in fewer places but actually be more secure as a result. Calculated columns are also now supported, so if you have calculated columns in your data tier, particular SQL Server, it will now see those calculated columns and you'll be able to use those in direct query. ActiveX is finally gone. So this is my SSRS slide. I don't, I really, there's a lot of new stuff in SSRS, a lot. The interesting part to me is that this feature is most definitely one of the most important ones that we don't have to talk about a lot. We just are happy it's finally here. With ActiveX finally gone, we're going to get standard print option. It really helps us to, from the web, from the platform to say, hey, I want to print this. It's going to do what every other system does on the web platform side. It's going to create a PDF in the browser and print it using standard options, not standing, but standard options. Sorry about that. So, hey, anything you print online today pretty much says, hey, we're going to open a PDF and, then allows you to print it. Now SSRS has that capability natively, and in the process has eliminated ActiveX. So that gives you, that capability when you're looking at SSRS. I believe this has been a whirlwind. I think there's some questions. Liz, being my way before we go, though, I just want you to know what else is new. There's a lot of other new things. There's 2 more on here. I didn't know how long it would take me to get through all 15 of those. String escape, supporting JSON escape characters in your, your standard, work within SQL Server. And you can add calculated tables in DAX, basically virtual tables created by DAX in Tabular models. Those are just 2 more things that I didn't really even cover in the time that we had, and some other things to look at. So I'm going to let Liz, are there questions, or now that I interrupted her the first time?
You ready?
I'm ready. Let's bring him on.
Okay. Someone would like to know what's available in standard versus enterprise editions.
Oh, you thought this is one? That's not a hidden gem.
No.
That's just, so everything's in enterprise, as you well know, which is, not really helpful in that answer. I would actually need to understand what you're looking for specifically. So let's take Always On, for example. Always On Basic is supports a 2-node Always On availability group. It is supported in standard now, something that wasn't there before. But if there's, the T-SQL functionality, that's, the string functions, those are supported. The reporting, that's all, I believe that's available in standard. I think, pretty sure that is. SSIS, I believe the feature pack for like Azure is just available. I'm not sure, I'm not sure what distinctions are there between that because of how that's done. Is probably how it's delivered in the mode it's operating in. The one I don't know is I don't know if like Always On for SSIS is available. But if there's specific thing you're looking for, just let us know so I can track that down.
Okay. Someone wants to know if accessing cubes in SQL Server 2016 via Excel is going to be much faster than it is in the older versions.
Trick question, or is it a trick answer? That's what we got. They've improved. Okay, so here this is going to sound totally like a consulting answer. Microsoft has improved overall in performance against in the cubes as well as Tabular. However, what I don't know is I don't know what improvements have been made in the generated MDX coming out of Excel, if it's improved enough to take advantage of the improvements that were made in the platform. Because those teams work very independently of each other, I'm not entirely, I can't give you any metrics to say, hey, it's better. If you're MDX is straightforward and it's not a lot of complex things coming out of Excel, which we all, if we've looked at MDX, we know it's always complex. It really comes down if the optimizations will improve the overall performance based on receiving queries from Excel, and I don't know the answer to that question.
Will live query statistics work for older versions of SQL?
I was wondering if someone would ask me that. I haven't tried it with older versions, so I'm going to base my answer on what I understand Query Store does. I believe Query Store works with SQL 2014 as well. So I believe that where they, because it seems to be attached to that, what I would say is try, realistically, you're going to hook up SQL, grab the new Management Studio, and if it's available, you're going to have it there as an option. But my concern is I think it's attached to Query Store, so it's going to be dependent on that. I believe Query Store is reported in 2014. I'm not sure if it goes all the way back to 2012 or not. I would definitely not count on it working in 2008 R2 though. So it's just how far back it goes from there.
Okay. Can you query a JSON document that's in a table column?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually have done that presentation a couple times, and what you need to do is tell Liz that I need to do it again. So,
okay.
But yes, you can. The JSON functionality is there. What you'll find is if you check out, even I have some of that information in my blog posts. My concern around JSON is more related to its lack of index functions, and you can't actually index JSON still. So if you're moving at scale, there's still some concerns around performance at large scale if you're trying to do a lot of work within JSON. But if you're familiar with XML data type methods, there's a lot of similarities between what you can do with XML that you can do with JSON. So, understanding that difference, the biggest difference is not a native data type. As a result of it not being a native data type, there are implied performance issues, especially when you try to optimize for large queries. That's really where that's at.
Okay. Will upgrading to SQL 2016 add the additional TempDB files?
I don't know that. Let's track that one down.
Okay.
Because if you're upgrading, so let's think through what that means. If I'm upgrading a database, so if I'm going through a migration process, typically I would do a couple of ways of doing this. I would go and do an attach detach. Well, if I do that, that implies that I've already had the SQL Server instance already set up. So if the question is about an in-place upgrade, I don't know the answer to that. But if, which I would rarely recommend anyways, I'd always recommend, build build SQL Server 2016 on as its own instance, and then move either through whatever method you choose to migrate. But if you can migrate as simple as detach and attach, if you can do that, I would highly recommend doing that, and you can already have the TempDB set up and ready to go for that instance. So it would be done before you actually migrate. That'd be my recommendation.
Someone wants to know if ActiveX is also gone from SSIS.
Hopefully. It was deprecated in 2005 when DTS was deprecated, and we are far enough out on versions. I think the ActiveX should be gone. That's a really good question that I can go look and see if I have an ActiveX task. If I see it there, we're all going to go, really? And there is no ActiveX task. Just double checking here. Make sure they hide it with other names so they didn't have to be ashamed of it. No, I believe that is finally gone. I'll come up here and just double check, but yeah. We have script tasks, which we've had since 2005, and it looks to me like it's gone. So.
Okay. Will the new CDC for Oracle by Tunity component support Oracle 12c?
That is a Tunity thing. I believe that I saw that it was supporting 12c, but I also know that we are running, we actually have projects where we're using some of the Tunity items, and I don't know which pieces are working as well as expected or not. So that may be a little bit too much information there, but I don't know that explicitly. You'd have to look up the Tunity drivers on 12c. Tunity owns that as opposed to Microsoft.
With the removal of ActiveX and SSRS printing, is there now a native delivery method to a network printer in SSRS subscriptions?
Don't know. See, all these great questions that I don't know the answer to. Have we already had the SSRS session?
Yes, it was Tuesday.
Okay. It was Tuesday. That would have been the right time to ask that question because someone was focused entirely on SSRS. But let's go ahead and record that one, and we'll try to get an answer back to everyone on that one.
Someone wants to know what 2016 has added to JSON.
That's a whole nother presentation. You guys are awesome. So here's the basic list. Is it actually understands what JSON is. You can actually do for JSON. You can do, so for JSON, what's the other functions that we can do? We have an is JSON function that can identify if the data is actually in the, properly formatted for JSON. We have JSON query, JSON value functions, both which can interrogate inside of what's happening in your JSON file or snippet that you're working with. There is also open JSON functionality, so we can actually open it up, turn it into a table. When I talked about cross-apply before with the string functions that we were just talking about, that similar process, we can actually pull that apart. And there's like five, I think there's 5 total functions plus four JSON and open JSON. But they all actually, they work with varchar and varchar data types. So that's where, if you're familiar with XML, we actually had an XML data type we worked with. We don't have that functionality now. So it's a fairly limited set, and there's no indexing natively built into SQL Server for JSON yet. That's pretty much that's like the high level of my entire presentation.
This next question is one that I'm surprised that we have yet to get. Someone wants to know why you would want to move to SQL Server 2016.
So here's the big use cases. Let's start with the big ones. You have a system that you can take advantage of the in-memory technology, which is highly improved and highly updatable inside of 2016. It's the first time some of this is put together. So if you have a need for high performance, and you can find that by running, if you run an Upgrade Advisor from Microsoft, you can find out if you can take advantage of that. So, like, all right, I can take advantage of it, I should switch to 2016. If you want to run operational reporting against your live transactional system, that in-memory technology is the OLTP in-memory as well as column store will provide that in a unique way that's pretty much separates it in the environment and separates it from all other database technologies. That's one. Now we start talking about components. If you're using analysis services, we talked about there's some overall core performance improvements. Upgrading it'll just run better. Microsoft has a blog or series of blog posts out there called "It Just Runs Faster." So if I encourage you to look at that list of reasons. It actually says, hey, these things just run faster in SQL 2016. The improvements that were made to the engine, that some of which we don't even know what that means. There's a lot of that. If you are planning to do any type of cloud hybrid scenarios, you will want to be on SQL Server 2016. It gives you that capability. If you're running very, 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 very large databases, SQL 2016, we work with HP is one of our partners. We work with them on their Superdome platform. We help them, prove out SQL Server running with 4 terabytes of memory and hundreds of cores. We're looking forward to Windows 2016 at the end of the year or whenever that gets released. It will allow SQL Server to actually use 12 terabytes of RAM. If you think about some of our in-memory work that we're talking about, this becomes a big deal if you're using large databases. SSIS improvements, you saw the highlights there. If you have a mission-critical system and you're already using availability groups, you have a compelling story. If you're using reporting services at all, in any way, shape, or form, this is a no-brainer. Migrate. Go to SQL SSRS 2016 and take advantage of updated technology and it's just so much better. We've all complained since 2008 that reporting services has not gotten any love. It got a lot of love, and getting more love as we go along. So those are some of those compelling reasons. I'm trying to think if there's, we can always look at every specific use case, and there's options and things we can take advantage of that exist in 2016 that didn't exist before. There's a lot of changes. That's the key there, and frankly, it's very stable because it's been running in Azure for a long time. So.
Dan Taylor, who's one of our other consultants, he said that from a DBA administration perspective, they have significantly reduced the time it takes to run DBCCs, update stats, AMD index, rebuilds, and it improves the ability to meet SLAs.
So there you go, from the insider.
Yep. Someone wants to know if you can comment about temporal tables.
Yeah, I consider that in the group of non-hidden because Microsoft's talked about those in a variety of instances as we have as well. So temporal tables are a great new feature that allow you to actually store off all the changes really simply, and there's no impact to your users. And so you can actually go and apply temporal table logic to a, and we'll just use a dimensional table where you might have a slowly changing scenario. You can actually have it track the dates and times the data is valid and do some simple querying. It's still Rev 1, so some of the functionality I would say is, it'll get richer, but it does give you the basics of what you need if you're actually trying to keep track of changes that occur over time. It stores it in another table. So this gets into this interesting thing about all the stuff that works together. If you're actually using temporal table a lot, you can actually stretch that to Azure SQL DB and be able to use temporal tables to hold the history in lower cost storage and or offline storage, and then be able to not offline but off-premise storage, and then keep the most current data right there for everyone to use. But if someone needs to look at history, they'll be able to. It uses a system date function or system time function. I can't remember off the top of my head right now. But it allows you basically to say, hey, if I want to see data, what this data looked like between June 1 and June 30 of 2015, I can actually run a query, specify that in the criteria, and I will get those rows back. So that's a little high level. If that's something you want to hear more about, I would encourage you to let Liz know, and we'll try to get someone on the docket to talk more specifically about temporal tables.
I think we have one last question. They want to know if you can use SSRS with an older data source like 2012 and if there's any drawbacks to that.
No drawbacks. Keep in mind, SSRS, if you're talking about the reporting services database, that will need to be in 2016. So if you think of it in terms of, I need that reporting services database, but if I'm actually going after data, it doesn't matter what the data source is. There's no inherent limitations if I'm, my reporting environments in 2016 and all my data is in 2008 R2, your performance implications are the same as they would have been in any other type of reporting tool. Basically, how fast does 2008 R2 run? So.
Okay. Well, that was the last question. So as Steve said, I will get these questions over to him, and I know some of them needed more in-depth answers, so we'll be sure to put those out on our blog as soon as we get those questions answered. And then also if Steve wants to expand on some of these questions that we asked, we'll be sure to include that in the blog as well. I know a couple people, Steve, have asked if your presentation will be available. Can I say yes to that?
Yes, you can, and okay. I will get it to you so you can post it. So.
Okay, great. Thanks. And as always, the session was recorded, so you will receive an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. Again, like Steve said, if you have any additional questions, you can email me, Liz, and I'll be happy to pass them along. Or if you want a specific webinar around any of these topics that we haven't done already, please let us know. We're always looking for ideas, and we want to know what you guys think, and if we're on the right track or if we need to expand on certain things. So please feel free to let us know at any time. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you so much, Steve, for presenting, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks.